High FM, your station of choice since 2008.
There is a big discussion taking place, or a big meeting taking place, rather, today, later today, with Zelensky and Trump. But what happened at the meeting with Trump and Putin? What do we understand from that? Joining us is Irina Tsukerman, who is a human rights and a national security lawyer based in the United States. Irina, good morning. Thank you for joining us. How did the meeting go between Trump and Putin?
To this day, there are parts of this meeting that have not been publicly disclosed, but we know a couple of things. First, the meeting was cut short. It was expected to be to go much longer than it was. Second, there was no deal about Ukraine reached, no understanding of any kind. But we do know that President Trump, following the meeting, moved away from his previous position of pushing for an immediate ceasefire, instead adopting the position of the Kremlin that there should be an immediate talk about peace. And Putin's proposal appears to be that he is willing to freeze the conflict if Ukraine relinquishes claims over occupied territories, all of Donbass, including some of the territories that are not currently occupied and where Russia has not been able to advance. We also know that there were some activities apparently planned that were ultimately not executed, perhaps because the two parties did not come to a clear agreement. And we also know that Trump is now trying to push Zelensky into acquiescing to this proposal, and claiming that there will be security guarantees if Zelensky does take up Putin on this deal. However, the nature of those security guarantees remains uncertain. So far, the only thing that we have heard from the State Department is that they would include Russia revising its constitution, allegedly to relinquish its claims over any further Ukrainian territories. It did not include the immediate stopping of civilian killings or the release of the abducted children or any other civilians that were taken away from Ukraine. So the constitutional changes are very questionable because Russia has ignored many previously allegedly ironclad written agreements with various countries. So there is no reason to believe that Russia cannot restart that conflict at any given moment, even if it agrees to something initially.
The fact that we don't know everything that was discussed at that meeting, does that mean that there's a possibility that there were certain undertakings that might be agreed and that it would, in order to provide Zelensky with a win? In other words, when they meet Zelensky today, when Zelensky meets later, if he pushes on certain things, perhaps those have already been agreed with Trump, but it makes it seem as though, and Putin, it makes it seem as though that is a win for Zelensky, which can bring the parties closer together and closer towards a peace agreement.
First of all, Trump has absolutely no power to enforce anything that does not only include Russia and the United States. So by not bringing Ukraine to the table from the very beginning, he essentially made the entire nature of communications all about Russia-US relations and not about resolving the issues regarding the war. So Zelensky is coming with a whole team of European leaders to show a united front and to prevent an abusive scenario where Trump or his officials attempt to corner Zelensky the way it happened in February. Nevertheless, it's very unlikely that there will be any sort of agreement at the table, Zelensky made it very clear that the only issue he has to discuss with Putin is whether Russia is willing to make serious territorial concessions. But Putin has made it clear in his discussion with Trump that the only concessions he'd be making are extremely minor and not anything substantive or strategic, which would not satisfy Ukrainian constitutional requirement not to engage in unilateral cessation of strategic land, and could potentially most likely perpetuate the conflict. I think, if anything, the fact that Trump did not bring Zelensky to the initial meeting is actually widening the gap between the two sides.
Interesting.
And making it less likely that there's going to be any sort of even temporary pause.
What about the NATO position in terms of Ukraine and NATO? Was that part of the conversation?
From what we know, Putin was quite adamant in not allowing Ukraine to join NATO, even though, by the way, in earlier videos, Putin had absolutely no problem with Ukraine potentially joining NATO or any other international defense alliance. He changed that position circa Crimea, and this is the position that he currently holds. Trump, in his most recent tweets that he has been posting, social media posts rather, in the last few hours, made it clear that he is siding with Putin and that he would hold Zelensky accountable for not putting a stop in the war if he continues to pursue an effort to join NATO or does not agree to the alleged peace plan. The fact of the matter is Trump cannot do anything past his own the rest of his term. He can freeze any effort to advance Ukraine's candidacy at this time. But what happens with NATO afterwards, he has no practical control over. So by saying that it will never happen, he can only say it will never happen during his term in office, and after that, that's up to the powers that be.
If I had to ask you a final question, what percentage chance do you think this meeting has today, and this particular set of meetings has, of achieving a peace agreement? What percentage, what chance do you think it'll have? Zero.
Absolutely
so there's
none.
Wow.
Absolutely none, unless Trump is willing to commit very serious resources to backing Ukraine, not with commercial sales of weapons to Europe, which they may choose to then donate to Ukraine, but with a very serious posture that puts very serious pressure on Russia over the fate of the civilians, over attacks on civilian hubs, over attacks on U.S. targets, such as the cyber attack on the federal court shortly before the summit, and so forth. Without a very clear U.S. position, along with the rest of the NATO, Putin will continue to try to manipulate different parties and try to pit them one against the other. There's absolutely no way to secure any sort of serious peace agreement under such circumstances.
That's where we leave it. Irina Tsukerman, thank you as always. Irina says zero chance of a peace or an agreement being reached.